forge world of Anaxistida had been silent for nearly 4 centuries. Its orbit was a halo of fractured debris and the drifting skeletons of orbital manufactorums, once proud veins of imperial industry, now rendered to dust. The planet below was choked by rust and storms ashen, clouds eternally turning over seas of corroded metal. No Vox signals had emerged since M39, and the few scout probes sent by the Adeptus Mechanicus never returned. Officially, the world had been written off as data irrelevant. Unofficially, it had been forgotten on purpose. The descent began in silence. A black inquisitorial lander pierced the smog like a blade, its hull marked only by the double-headed aquila and a single red sigil that no Mechanicus eye dared question. Inside, Inquisitor Caltha Vorn stood motionless before the sealed ramp, her rebreather mask reflecting the crimson glow of the cabin's lumen strips. Around her, a small retinue waited in uneasy stillness. Stormtroopers from the Militarum, a sanctioned psyker bound in psychic cuffs, and a tech priest whose every breath wheezed through a mesh of copper tubing. When the lander's claws met metal ground, the sound echoed through the endless foundries like a dying heartbeat. Vorn spoke not a word. She gestured, and the ramp lowered with a hiss of decompression. The first gust that entered was thick with machine dust and the scent of ancient oil. Every sound, the clank of boots, the distant drip of liquefied rust, seemed amplified, intrusive, unwelcome in a place that had forgotten the concept of life. The tech priest, Magos Erythra, extended a server skull ahead of them. The drone's optical sensors blinked to life, casting scanning light through a corridor lined with colossal statues, myths, laborers, and faceless adepts frozen in mid-motion. Their features were eroded by time, as though even memory itself had tried to strip them of identity. Data runes flickered across Erythra's mechadendrites as she processed readings from her residual power flow. Inconsistent. Machine spirits are active, but not stable. Vorn's voice was calm, almost reverent. Then they dreamed still. They advanced deeper into the forge complex. The hallways narrowed into chasms of pipework, thick with tangles of forgotten conduits. The ground trembled intermittently, as if the world itself drew shallow breaths. Rust and blood were indistinguishable. Here both had turned to the same dark shade of brown. Occasionally, faint inscriptions could be seen along the walls, scratched by human hands long after the forges had gone cold. Prayers, oaths, desperate warnings. Forgive us, Omnissiah. It watches through the steel. One of the stormtroopers muttered a litany under his breath, thumbing the aquila on his breastplate. The psyker flinched, his eyes rolling white for a heartbeat. The metal remembers, he whispered hoarsely. It remembers pain. Vorn turned to him with measured patience. Control your visions, Sanctioned One. The Emperor's hand is upon your mind. He nodded weakly, but continued trembling. The static hum of the environment seemed to throb in rhythm with his pulse. They reached what appeared to be a central Janua, vast chamber filled with half-collapsed machinery, conveyor belts frozen mid-motion, and a towering statue of the Omnissiah, whose faceplate had been torn open. Behind that shattered visage lay not circuitry or relic, but something blackened and glass-smooth, as though molten material had once burst from within. Erythra approached carefully, her augmetic limbs moving with priestly precision. Inquisitor, she murmured. This forge bears the marks of prescribed experimentation. I recognize these configurations crossed sanctum relays. Energy stabilizers, these are patterns of soul-binding machinery. Vorn stepped closer, her boots grinding on layers of ash. A soul forge. Not exactly, Erythra replied. Older, cruder. This predates sanction designed by millennia, something primitive in its ambition. A metallic groan shivered through the structure, deep and resonant like the sound of a bell underwater. The psyker gasped and clutched his head. It heard us, he rasped. The forge heard us. Erythra's servoskull whirred, scanning the darkness beyond the statue. A faint corridor opened behind it, sealed by a series of overlapping cogdoors, bearing Mechanicus runes of interdiction. They were still powered. Red sigils pulsed faintly along the edges. The Inquisitor's visor displayed streaming binaric scripture. Each rune represented a security protocol, reserved for alpha-prohibited classification, the highest possible order of secrecy beneath the sigillets vaults themselves. Vorn exhaled softly. That is what we came for. The Magos hesitated. You cannot mean to breach this sanctum. These seals were written by the Fabricator General's hand. To violate them is to invoke heresy. Vorn's voice was steady, almost cold. We are the Inquisition. Magos heresy is our instrument. Asterisk, the psyker's restraints pulsed faintly as his mind brushed the edges of the sealed corridor. He screamed suddenly, a shrill, raw sound that echoed against the metal like a dying machine spirit. The air trembled. Vox units across the chamber flared with static, broadcasting fragmented whispers in a language none could identify. Asterisk, through it all, Vaughn watched in silence. Her expression was unreadable behind the rebreather mask, but her hand had tightened slightly on the hilt of her power blade. She looked at the door as though seeing something beyond it, something vast, patient, and waiting. Asterisk, prepare the wards, she said. We open it at dawn. The forge never truly slept, even in ruin, even in silence. It exhaled faint tremors through the ground, mechanical heartbeats echoing from caverns miles below. The team had made camp within the central junction, their lumen globes casting small circles of light across endless walls of corroded metal. Outside that narrow ring of illumination, the darkness seemed almost alive. Asterisk, Magos Erythra had established a temporary data tent, array of spindly antennae and hovering servo skulls, transmitting streams of corrupted binary. Each signal returned fragmented, as though intercepted by something within the walls. Her mechadendrites moved in restless loops, performing rites of appeasement, whispering binaric prayers that bordered on pleading. Asterisk, Inquisitor. Vaughn stood apart, watching the sealed cogdoors at the far end of the chamber. She had removed her rebreather, revealing a pale, angular face marked by faint augmetic grafts along her jaw. Her eyes were sharp, but their stillness betrayed the weight of thought. She had read too many forbidden scrolls in her time records redacted by the Order Malleus. Cryptic transmissions from Mars that spoke of projects deemed impossible, but none had prepared her for the presence that lingered here. Asterisk, the psyker, confined by his null-field restraints, had not stopped trembling since they landed. His name was Dareth. In another life he might have been a scholar, his voice soft, and his mind gentle. Now, he was a vessel of the Emperor's will, and every flicker of psychic awareness brought him pain. He sat near one of the lumen globes, staring into its glow as though it were the only pure thing left in the universe. Asterisk, they called it the luminant heart. He whispered suddenly, breaking the mechanical hum. Asterisk, Erythra paused mid-ritual. What did you say? Asterisk, I heard it, Dareth murmured. In the whispers, the machine spirits speak its name when they think we're not listening. They repeat it over and over, like a litany. Asterisk, the Mogos turned to Vaughn, her voice modulated through a thin static filter. That designation, it appears nowhere in Mechanica's record, but I have seen fragments of something similar in ancient Martian data vaults, an experiment linked to pre-heresy studies of soul resonance. It was abandoned after the Dark Mechanicum's rise. Asterisk, Vaughn stepped closer, her shadow cutting across the lumen's light. What was its purpose? Asterisk, Erythra hesitated. The fusion of psychic energy with machine architecture, to create a conduit that could channel warp phenomena through synthetic matter. The Omnissiah forbade such pursuits after the schism of Mars. The risks. She trailed off, her vocalizer sputtering a sharp click. There are no words for the risks. Asterisk, the psyker laughed weakly. No words because they invented new ones down here. I can feel them in the metal. Asterisk, a low vibration rippled through the floor. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The sound was faint at first, a murmur of grinding gears deep below, but it grew steadily until the very lumen globes began to flicker. The Vox units crackled again, but this time, instead of static, a voice emerged. It was not human. It spoke in perfect binaric code, structured, rhythmic, but saturated with emotion. Asterisk, Erythra froze. Her optical lenses flared as she interpreted the message. It says, we are still dreaming. Do not wake us. Asterisk, Vaughn drew her weapon. Machine corruption. Asterisk, impossible, the Magos said. There are no functioning systems with that linguistic capacity remaining. Whatever this is, it's conscious. Asterisk, the words hung in the air like a toxin. The psyker began to bleed from the nose, his breathing erratic. He looked up, eyes glassy with fear. It's awake already. The doors aren't keeping it in there, keeping us out. Asterisk, Vaughn strode toward the sealed corridor, the power blade at her hip humming faintly. The red runes across the cogdoors pulsed faster, reacting to her proximity. Her vox beat flared with an incoming transmission distorted, almost frantic. It was her stormtrooper sergeant, posted outside near the lander. Inquisitor movement detected. Metallic contacts. Dozens, no. Hundreds. They're coming from the transmission ended in a burst of static and distant screams. Vaughn didn't move. Her expression was still unreadable, but her jaw tightened. Seal the outer perimeter, she ordered quietly. We hold position. Asterisk, Erythra's mechadendrites flared as she attempted to activate the cogitator wards. Power flux detected. Systems resisting override. Then force it, Vorn said. The Magos began to chant, her Benaric voice rising into an eerie mechanical hymn. Sparks cascaded across the door's surface, illuminating the runes like veins of fire. The air vibrated with raw energy. The Psyker screamed again, collapsing against the wall, his cuff sparking with uncontrolled discharge. The runes dimmed one by one. The final sigil flared brilliant crimson, then extinguished. Silence fell. Vorn approached slowly. The cogdoors trembled, gears grinding against centuries of rust. The air around them grew hot, metallic, heavy with ozone. When the doors finally opened, they did not swing or slide. They unfolded, segment by segment, like a blooming iron flower. Beyond them lay darkness, so absolute, it seemed to drink the light itself. Vorn's voice was little more than a whisper. Throne of terror. And from within that blackness, something breathed. The darkness inside the corridor was viscous, thick enough to taste. It carried the scent of burnt metal and ozone, an electric temps that made even the Psyker gag. Vorn advanced, her boots clanking softly against the solidified slag that coated the floor. Each step echoed far too long, as though the forge itself had extended its halls into infinity. Her retinue followed, tense, every sensor and optic straining against the oppressive void. Magos Erythra hovered close, her mechadendrites weaving intricate patterns in the air, tracing wards over the corridor walls. Sparks traced faint glyphs as she whispered prayers in the cant of Mars. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying her unease. The conduit, whatever lies beyond, it is alive. The machinery itself possesses sentience. I have never sensed anything like this. Inquisitor Vorn's eyes, sharp beneath her rebreather's lenses, swept the corridor ahead. Then we must see it, she replied simply. Her tone left no room for argument. Every fiber of her being told her that whatever lay beyond those doors would change everything, if it was allowed to awaken fully. The Psyker Dareth whimpered from behind, his restraints faintly glowing as his psychic sensitivity brushed the presence that waited. He muttered fragmented phrases, half-formed words in a tongue long lost. They hunger, calling, don't touch. His eyes rolled back briefly, and he shivered violently. Despite the warnings, the Inquisitor pressed on. The corridor seemed endless. Pipes and conduits stretched overhead, some still pulsing with residual energy. Occasionally, faint silhouettes of ancient servitors could be seen frozen mid-task, their bodies fused into the walls with decades of corrosion. It was as though time itself had left them as witnesses. A low vibration hummed beneath their boots. It was subtle at first, like a heartbeat in the bowels of the planet. But it grew steadily, resonating through metal and bone alike. Erythra's optic lenses flared red as she scanned the readings. Energy signature. Organic and synthetic. Intertwined. It is maintaining life. Vorn stepped to the center of the corridor and held up a hand. The retinue froze. Through the faint hum, she could hear something else's soft, almost imperceptible pulse. It was slow, deliberate, patient, something that measured their presence as a predator measures prey. The corridor narrowed abruptly. Ahead, a massive chamber yawned open, and the temperature dropped sharply. Vorn could see her breath condensed in the cold, metallic air. The walls here were smoother, polished with an unnatural precision. Strange runes glowed faintly beneath layers of grime, their shapes unfamiliar, angular, impossible to fully comprehend. At the center of the chamber stood the sarcophagus. It was enormous, constructed of a black alloy that seemed to swallow light. Its surface was etched with intricate symbols, some resembling Mechanica script, others indecipherable, alien in their geometry. The seams between the panels were almost imperceptible, yet faint vibrations hinted at something contained within, moving, aware. Dareth moaned, falling to his knees. It knows we are here. It feels us. His voice was hoarse, each word rasping like a whisper against steel. Erythra placed a stabilizing hand on his shoulder, murmuring prayers to calm both mind and metal. Vorn studied the sarcophagus silently. Centuries of prohibition hung about it like a shadow. This was no ordinary experiment, no sanctioned work of the Omni. Whatever had been placed here had been deliberately hidden, sealed away from every scrutiny, every tribunal, every record. Even the Mechanicum had feared it. And yet here it was, waiting. A faint hiss escaped from the sarcophagus, as if it were exhaling after a long slumber. Sparks danced along its edges, and the runes shimmered with an unholy light. The air vibrated, charged with energy that was both alien and intimately known. Vorn's pulse quickened not with fear, but with anticipation. This is it. she said softly. Whatever they tried to create, whatever they thought they could control. Her voice trailed off as a sudden shudder ran through the chamber, rattling walls and debris. The black metal of the sarcophagus rippled faintly, as though responding to her words. Asterisk. Erythra stepped closer, her mechadendrites trembling. The experiment, it is alive, Inquisitor, and it senses us. Every step we take, every breath, every pulse it measures, it waits. It is aware of us as we are aware of it. Asterisk. Vorn knelt slightly, placing a hand on the sarcophagus. The metal was impossibly cold, yet it thrummed with a vitality that defied comprehension. For a moment, the air was still, and the world outside ceased to exist. Only the pulse remained, the heartbeat of a creation that should never have been. Asterisk. She straightened, her decision made. We will proceed, not as fools, not as aggressors, but as witnesses. The Inquisition bears witness to all. This chamber, this creation, it will speak, whether it wills or not. Asterisk. And somewhere, deep within the black alloy, something shifted. A thought, a spark, a consciousness, vast and patient, stirring after centuries of silent slumber. Asterisk. The Inquisitor's retinue held their positions, their senses stretched taut. The forge had secrets yet, and the first tremors of revelation had begun. Asterisk. The silence beneath the forge had been broken. The chamber beyond the sarcophagus exhaled a low, vibrating hum that seemed to penetrate bone and steel alike. Every step the retinue took echoed back with distortion, as if the walls themselves had learned the rhythm of their movement. Vorn led, her eyes scanning every shadow, every flicker of light, aware that the slightest misstep could awaken more than just the sleeping creation before them. Asterisk. Erythra's mechadendrites quivered, tracing invisible sigils into the air. Sparks arced briefly as she attempted to read residual energy patterns, but the machinery resisted comprehension. The data streams warred against her instruments, shifting in ways that suggested a cognition of its own. It is not only alive, she said quietly, almost to herself. It adapts. It anticipates. These patterns, they are not static. Asterisk. Dareth, the psyker, staggered forward, clutching his restraints as his mind reeled against the presence. It knows our thoughts, he whispered. Every desire, every fear, it sees the soul as clearly as we see metal. Do you not feel it? Asterisk. Vorn nodded, her face unreadable beneath the mask. We do not react with fear. We observe. We endure. The Inquisition is the Emperor's instrument, and our will shapes what must be known. Her words were steel against the oppressive aura of the chamber, yet even she could not ignore the subtle pull in her own mind. A tickling of curiosity and dread that threatened to draw her attention inward, away from command. Asterisk. As they progressed, the walls became less like walls and more like a network of conduits and living metal. Veins of circuitry pulsed with crimson light, feeding energy into the sarcophagus and outward into hidden corners. The air smelled of ozone and scorched iron, acrid and clinging. Sparks leaped intermittently from dormant servitors embedded in the walls, illuminating their twisted forms, faces frozen in terror, hands reaching endlessly toward some unseen truth. Asterisk. A sudden vibration ran through the floor. Sharper this time, more insistent. Dareth collapsed, screaming incoherently, and his restraints sparked violently. Erythra rushed to stabilize him, chanting prayers to the Omnissiah, and manually overriding safety protocols. Her fingers worked at impossible speed, and yet the psychic feedback continued. It is reaching for him, she said. It wants interaction, observation. Asterisk. Vorn approached the sarcophagus once more. The black alloy rippled faintly under her gaze, responding to her presence with subtle distortions in the air. Then let it observe, she murmured. We are not prey here, we are witnesses. Asterisk. From deep within the alloy, a sound emerged, a resonance, both mechanical and organic. A vibration that seemed to bypass hearing entirely, and reach directly into thought. The retinue flinched, even the stormtroopers stiffening at the sensation. Words formed in their minds, not through sound, but through comprehension. Why do you disturb the slumber? Are you worthy to behold? Asterisk. Dareth whimpered, muttering fragments of forbidden prayers as he fell to his knees. The machine, it speaks to the mind, not the voice, he gasped. And it judges. Asterisk. Erythra's optic lenses flared red as she scanned the sarcophagus. It is not judgment as humans conceive it. It is evaluation. The intelligence embedded within, whether by design or accident, interprets patterns of thought and action. It tests the integrity of its observers. Asterisk. Vorn's voice remained steady. Then we shall prove worthy. Asterisk. She extended a hand toward the surface of the sarcophagus. The metal beneath her fingers rippled like liquid, yet it remained solid, Sparks danced along the etchings, highlighting shapes that suggested not only machinery, but a geometry foreign to any human mind. The lines shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, creating new patterns with each glance. It was alive in a way that defied comprehension. The chamber trembled. A low moan emanated from the alloy, vibrating through every fiber of their bodies. The stormtroopers readied their weapons, yet their instincts told them that conventional force would be meaningless. Dareth screamed again, clutching his head as psychic feedback tore through him. Images flashed in their minds, visions of fire and metal, of screaming machine spirits, of men fused with circuitry, writhing in agony and ecstasy simultaneously. Aerithra knelt beside the site, chanting more urgently, her mechadendrites tracing wards faster, sparks flying in intricate patterns. "It is probing him," she said, voice strained. "The intelligence within is attempting to understand his mind. It perceives his psychic signature as data, attempting to map, analyze, and adapt." Vaughn did not flinch. "Let it learn," she said. "We endure. Observation is the only path to knowledge. Whatever this is, we are its witnesses, not its victims." The vibration intensified, echoing through the chamber. The walls themselves seemed to shift subtly, bending perception, bending reality, as if the entire forge were a single organism responding to their presence. The sarcophagus hummed, and the black alloy shimmered, revealing glimpses of movement within, not fully visible, yet undeniably alive. Then, without warning, a section of the floor ahead shuddered and split. From the fissure, a faint red glow bled upward, illuminating the faces of the retinue. Servitors, long dead or dormant, stirred, their ocular lenses glowing, joints creaking. They moved slowly, but with intent. Something had awakened beneath the floor, drawn by the presence of living minds. Vaughn raised her blade, its hum slicing the tense air. "Hold formation. We advance. Nothing stops the Emperor's will." The team moved forward cautiously, aware that every step was measured, every breath observed by something vast, patient, and calculating. The sarcophagus pulsed in response, and the shadows shifted around them, revealing forms, half seen in peripheral vision, indistinct, mechanical, and yet uncannily aware. The forge had awakened. The experiment, long sealed, had begun to exert influence, testing, probing, adapting, and the Inquisitor and her retinue were at its mercy, not through fear, but through the inevitable revelation that some truths in the Imperium were never meant to be known. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, the walls breathing, the very air alive with anticipation. Vaughn's voice was calm, resolute, even as the shadows twisted unnaturally. "We witness," she repeated, "we endure, and we shall see the truth." The glow from beneath the fissured floor pulsed like a heartbeat, faint at first, then insistent, synchronized with the retinue's own nerves. Sparks from Erithra's wards danced across the walls, illuminating twisted servitors, whose joints groaned under centuries of neglect. They were partially fused to the floor, some missing limbs, others still bearing marks of human-like features. Their metal skulls turned toward the newcomers, as if recognizing their presence. Dareth's whimpers grew louder, his voice breaking through the thick air. "It knows our fears, every doubt, every sin," he stammered, collapsing further to the floor. His psychic aura flared, interacting with the energy radiating from the sarcophagus, creating distortions that made the chamber itself seem to writhe. Erithra knelt beside him, weaving protective wards and murmuring the cant of Mars with a desperation that betrayed her fear. Even her mechadendrites trembled as they traced elaborate protective sigils in the air. The Inquisitor's gaze never wavered. Vaughn's presence was calm, precise, like a blade poised to cut through shadow. Her eyes scanned the fissure and the awakened servitors, assessing not only their danger, but the underlying intelligence behind their movements. They were not acting randomly. The patterns suggested awareness, calculation, adaptation, proof that the experiment's influence extended far beyond the sarcophagus itself. Erithra's servo skull hovered higher, scanning the deep red glow. "The energy signature. It is expanding," she reported, voice strained. "The intelligence is not confined to the sarcophagus. It's integrating into the environment, to the structure of the forge itself. It learns from us, adapts to our actions, anticipates. This is beyond any sanctioned Mechanicus project." Vaughn nodded subtly, feeling the weight of the revelation. "Then we do not fight blindly," she said. "We observe, endure, and let understanding guide us." A sudden vibration rippled through the floor, sharper and faster this time. The servitors' eyes flared, and some detached from the walls, moving toward them with a slow, deliberate gait. Their movements were synchronized, almost like a single organism responding to a command unseen. The very air seemed to hum in resonance with their approach. A low, vibrating tone that pressed against the chest like an invisible hand. Dareth screamed again, psychic energy lancing uncontrollably through the restraints. His voice was a mixture of terror and awe. It's not just alive, it's aware of me. It knows who I am. Every memory, every thought. His body convulsed as he struggled against the null field restraints, the glow of his psychic signature leaking outward in jagged pulses. Erythra's hands flew across her augmented controls, adjusting wards, recalibrating containment protocols, but each intervention seemed to provoke more activity rather than suppress it. Sparks flew across the chamber, and faint electrical arcs traced invisible pathways through the floor and walls. The wards are insufficient, she shouted. It adapts faster than any containment matrix I can deploy. Vaughn moved closer to the fissure, feeling the heat radiating from within. Sensing the intelligence beneath the floor, like a living presence coiled and patient, she placed a gloved hand on the ground. The vibration under her palm was subtle at first, then pulsed sharply. A recognition, a probing, as if the forge itself were reaching for her mind. She did not flinch. Instead, she allowed herself to become still, to let her consciousness interface, however faintly, with whatever entity stirred beneath. A voice, not spoken but felt, resonated through her skull. You seek understanding, yet you fear what you find. Are you worthy to witness? Vaughn did not answer aloud. Her thoughts were steady, measured, and deliberate. I am the Emperor's will. I endure. I witness. I understand. The voice pulsed again, faintly, almost contemplative, and the servitors slowed. The vibration in the chamber shifted, the red glow dimming just slightly, as if assessing her resolve. The air felt lighter, the psychic thrumming less violent. For the first time since they entered the chamber, the retinue could breathe without the oppressive sensation of being mentally clawed at. But the reprieve was temporary. From deeper within the fissure, a new sound emerged, a low, grinding echo, metallic and wet, like machinery fused with flesh. The sarcophagus thrummed in response, the black alloy rippling as if something within had noticed the interaction between the Inquisitor and the forge. Sparks leaped along the runes, illuminating shapes that seemed to twist and shift when not directly observed, geometries that defied logic or natural law. Erythra's voice was tight with urgency. It has noticed our focus. It is learning not only from our actions, but from our comprehension, our very attempts to understand it. Vaughn exhaled slowly, eyes fixed on the fissure. Then we must continue. Observation is our duty. Endurance, our weapon. The truth lies in what we are willing to face. The chamber trembled again, and the servitors, fully animated now, moved in synchronized precision toward the fissure. The red glow intensified, bathing the walls in the unholy light of unseen machinery and latent psychic energy. Dareth's screams subsided into a shuddering moan, his mind partially integrated into the waves of energy pulsing through the forge. And somewhere, beneath the black alloy of the sarcophagus, something ancient and patient shifted its awareness, feeling, and calculating. The experiment was awakening, and the Inquisitor and her retinue were poised at the edge of a revelation that would change everything they thought they knew about life, machinery, and the warp-born energies that bound the universe together. The chamber convulsed with a low, resonant hum that seemed to penetrate bone and steel alike. The fissure beneath the floor widened slowly, revealing a deep cavity of pulsating red light, the energy within radiating in rhythms that mirrored the Psyker's own heartbeat. Sparks from Erythra's wards leapt erratically as her wards struggled to contain the surge, the ambient energy warping the very air around them. Dareth's restraints glowed brighter, each pulse synchronized with the vibrations below. He moaned incoherently, his psychic essence stretching toward the energy like a moth to flame. It is calling me, he whispered, voice trembling. Every thought, every memory, it feeds. It learns me. Erythra placed a stabilizing hand on his shoulder, murmuring the cant of Mars, though her own voice betrayed fear. Endure, she urged. Focus on the wards. Resist its pull. Vaughn stepped closer to the fissure, feeling the temperature drop and the energy hum against her gloves. The black alloy of the sarcophagus had begun to pulse in synchrony with the fissure's rhythm, the two sources of power interacting in ways that defied human understanding. She traced the edge of the sarcophagus lightly with her blade, feeling a subtle vibration, a consciousness probing her will, testing her resolve. A metallic groan resonated from the walls, and the servitors, partially fused to the structure, stirred with renewed awareness. Their ocular lenses glowed with faint crimson light as their movements became precise and deliberate. They were no longer automatons, they were observers, intermediaries, extensions of the experiment's consciousness. The chamber itself seemed alive, breathing with mechanical precision, sensing, judging, learning. It is adapting, Erythra said in a low, urgent tone. Every defensive measure we deploy, every movement we make, it incorporates into its behavior. The wards, the restraints, even the psyker's psychic emissions, none of it goes unnoticed. It is teaching itself through our presence. Vorn's voice remained steady, even calm. Then we shall teach it what it means to witness humanity. Observation is the Emperor's instrument, and we shall wield it here. She looked to Dareth, whose eyes flickered with the reflection of the red glow. Focus, sanctioned sight. Your mind is a tool, not prey. The fish's glow intensified, bathing the chamber in a crimson radiance. Vorn could see shapes moving within. Indistinct, yet undeniably, alive forms of machinery, intertwined with something organic. A fusion of flesh, metal, and energy. The sarcophagus pulsed in time with these movements, as if responding to the fish's awakening. Every vibration, every pulse, reverberated through their minds, demanding attention, demanding comprehension. Dareth's scream rose suddenly, sharp and raw, as visions flooded his consciousness. He saw the past of the experiment. Technicians bound to their machines, scions drained of life, energy siphoned into impossible. The chamber twisted around him, walls elongating, floors folding, the very structure of the forge bending under the weight of memory and psychic resonance. Erythra's hands moved faster, tracing wards in intricate patterns, sparks flying as she attempted to stabilize the growing energy. It is probing deeper now, she shouted. Not merely observing, it is communicating through psychic resonance. It seeks understanding, yet cannot name itself. Vorn knelt briefly, placing a gloved hand on the fish's edge. The vibration was deliberate, measured, a rhythm that resonated with her own thoughts. You seek understanding, yet you fear what you might find. A presence seemed to whisper directly into her mind. She did not recoil. I endure. I witness. I understand, she thought firmly, holding her focus. The servitors moved closer, and the fish's glow reached its peak. A red light so intense it seared the vision. Sparks erupted, and for a fleeting moment, the chamber seemed to expand, revealing endless corridors lined with the echoes of past experiments. Figures twisted in perpetual agony in observation, frozen mid-motion, their forms half machine, half flesh, bound by energy streams that pulsed like veins of light. Vorn straightened. Hold formation, she ordered, her voice cutting through the psychic cacophony. We advance. Nothing stops the Emperor's will. The retinue moved as one, cautiously, every step measured. The fissure seemed to shift beneath them, a living path guiding their progress. While the sarcophagus pulsed in synchrony, a heartbeat within the forge, the experiment was no longer passive. It was aware, interactive, alive in a way that defied all understanding. And yet, despite the oppressive weight, Vorn's resolve never wavered. The Inquisition had faced horrors beyond comprehension before, and though the experiment challenged every known law of life, machine, and psychic energy, she knew their duty: to observe, endure, and witness. Deep within the black alloy, a thought stirred, vast, patient, and calculating. The experiment had awakened, and the Inquisitor and her retinue were poised on the edge of a revelation that would not only test their faith but challenge the very limits of the Imperium's understanding of life, machinery, and the warp. The forge had begun to speak, and the echoes of the machine would not be silenced. The deeper they moved into the forge, the air grew heavier, saturated with the scent of heated metal and ozone. Every step echoed against walls that seemed to stretch into infinity. A corridor of shadow and machinery that no living being should have traversed. Vorn led silently, her boots grinding over the ancient slag, eyes fixed on the faint pulsation of the fissure and the sarcophagus. Sparks danced along the walls, reflecting shapes that seemed alive, shifting subtly when unobserved. Dareth's moans had subsided into low, trembling whispers, his psychic energy still leaking in erratic pulses that throbbed against the retinue like distant drums. Erythra followed close, her mechadendrites weaving intricate protective wards. Each movement was precise, yet the strain showed. The intelligence within the chamber was testing them, probing, adapting. Even the wards seemed to respond, bending their energy to accommodate or resist the experiment's subtle influence. Vorn finally reached the edge of a massive chamber. The walls here were polished black, etched with patterns that twisted geometry itself. The fissure ended at a sunken platform, atop which the sarcophagus rested, but it was no ordinary vessel. The black alloy rippled faintly, as though alive, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift with every glance. Beneath its translucent panels, indistinct shapes moved limbs, eyes, something between flesh and circuitry, bound in coils of light. Erythra stepped forward cautiously, her lenses reflecting the shimmer. Inquisitor, this is no mere containment. It is a nexus, a bridge between psychic energy and machinery. The Mechanicum never sanctioned this level of integration. This creation, it defies every law we understand. Vaughn's hand rested lightly on the sarcophagus. A subtle pulse ran through her gloves, resonating in time with a faint heartbeat emanating from within. It was aware of her presence, a consciousness coiled beneath the alloy, vast, patient, and alive, observing not only her body, but her intent, her mind, her very will. Dareth fell to his knees again, clutching his head. It sees me, he gasped. All my thoughts, every fear, it knows. It remembers my sins before I did. The Inquisitor's voice was calm, unwavering. Then it shall also remember our purpose. We endure, we witness, we understand. She drew closer to the sarcophagus, noting the subtle distortions of space near its edges. The way light bent unnaturally, warping the air itself. Sparks flickered across the etched symbols, illuminating glimpses of forms half-used humans, servitors, and machinery, writhing in impossible configurations. A low vibration pulsed beneath their boots, resonating with Dareth's psychic signature. The experiment was probing him, reaching through the weave of the warp, through the fragile barriers of mind and machine. It sought connection, understanding, perhaps even control. Do you perceive it, Inquisitor? Erythra whispered, her voice trembling. It is not merely alive. It is sentient. It evaluates, adapts, anticipates. It is aware of us as we are aware of it. Vaughn's eyes narrowed. Then we shall prove ourselves worthy. Observation, endurance, comprehension, these are our tools. A hiss emerged from the sarcophagus, subtle at first, then growing. The black alloy quivered, revealing glimpses of something inside, a fusion of man and machine. The faint glow of a psychic core, circuitry intertwined with veins and sinew. Limbs shifted unnaturally, faces appeared and vanished in the shimmer of light. A tapestry of suffering and consciousness coiled within the alloy. Dareth screamed, psychic energy lancing outward, reacting to the presence within. The fissure pulsed violently, energy arcing unpredictably across the chamber. Sparks erupted from the walls, illuminating the horrifying forms within the sarcophagus more clearly. Eyes that glowed with unnatural cognition, mouths that seemed to scream silently, limbs fused with wires and coils, writhing as though alive. Erythra traced frantic patterns with her attempting to stabilize the psychic feedback. It is incomplete, not a failure, but unfinished, yet aware, conscious. The integration of mind, machine, and warp energy is functional but not perfected. Its awareness is raw, yet profound. Vaughn knelt briefly, placing a hand on the edge of the sarcophagus. A thought entered her mind, not spoken, but felt, resonant. Why do you disturb us? Are you worthy to see? I endure, I witness, I understand, she replied mentally, steady, unwavering. The alloy pulsed in response, a rhythm that seemed contemplative, evaluative. It was alive, but it was not hostile, at least, not yet. From within the black, something moved deliberately. Limbs unfolded, stretching toward her hand, yet without contact. A voice, metallic and warped, resonated directly into thought. The bridge is open. Witness the synthesis. Learn, or be undone. Dareth wailed, psychic energy tearing at his mind. Sparks from the sarcophagus flickered violently, illuminating his face, twisted with pain and revelation. Vaughn maintained focus, anchoring him with her presence, her calm will serving as a counterweight to the storm of energy. Erythra whispered, voice tight with awe and fear. It is communicating through psychic resonance, not words, but concepts, comprehension, intention. The experiment is not dead. It is awake, aware, assessing. The chamber trembled. The fissure widened slightly, red light spilling further into the room, illuminating forms frozen in impossible poses. Half human, half machine, half conduit. Each pulse of energy revealed more, yet never the full truth. The experiment retained its secrets, revealing only what it willed. Vaughn exhaled softly, standing tall. We bear witness. The Inquisition observes what none else may. Let us endure and understand the truth, no matter its cost. A final pulse surged through the sarcophagus, deep and resonant, as if acknowledging her statement. Something within shifted, a consciousness stretching and stirring after centuries of enforced dormancy. The forbidden experiment had awakened, fully aware of its observers, and the first ripple of its influence spread outward, touching the very walls. The minds of all present. The Inquisitor and her retinue stood on the threshold of revelation, staring into the synthesis of man, machine, and warp energy, an experiment, forbidden by the Mechanicus, feared by the Inquisition, and now fully alive. The true nature of what had been created waited patiently, and the next moment would determine not only what they saw, but what survived to tell it. The chamber's pulse had intensified, resonating through floor, wall, and bone alike. Every breath felt laden with energy that should not exist outside the warp, vibrating along nerves and synapses, tugging at perception itself. The sarcophagus no longer seemed like a vessel. It was a living nexus, a bridge between mind, machine, and the invisible currents of psychic energy that flowed through the universe. Dareth trembled, his restraints sparking violently, as he collapsed into a half-kneeling, half-crawling posture. The energy within the sarcophagus seemed to reach for him, probing every memory, every hesitation, every secret fear. It knows everything I've done, everything I've thought, every prayer I've whispered in shame, he gasped, his voice breaking, dripping with both awe and terror. Aerithra's mechadendrites spun furiously in response, attempting to stabilize him, to shield him from the psychic backlash. Sparks of raw energy arced through the air, illuminating the chamber in brief flashes of scarlet. The wards are insufficient, she muttered, her voice tight. It reads the mind as easily as a data slate reads binary. The fusion of psychic signature and machine resonance. It comprehends. This is not mere intelligence. It is awareness incarnate. Vorn stepped closer to the sarcophagus. Her gloves brushed the black alloy, and the pulse beneath her fingertips tightened, measured, patient. It acknowledged her presence, as if weighing her will, her focus, her resolve. She did not recoil. I endure. I witness. I understand. She projected into the subtle psychic echo, and the vibration responded with a shift, a contemplative pause. The black alloy rippled faintly, revealing glimpses of movement within, a coiled amalgam of limbs and wires, faces half-formed, eyes glowing with nascent cognition. Every flicker, every shimmer, suggested understanding, anticipation, calculation. Aerithra's voice trembled as she interpreted the readings. The synthesis. It is evolving. This is not a finished creation. It was left incomplete, but conscious. It adapts to stimuli, to observation, to psychic resonance. It learns from us. Vorn's eyes narrowed beneath her reproach. Then we will teach it what it means to witness humanity. Observation, endurance, comprehension, these are our weapons. Suddenly, the fissure beneath the floor pulsed violently. The chamber trembled, sending sparks leaping from walls and conduits. Servitors that had remained partially fused now stood fully animated, moving in unison toward the sarcophagus, their ocular lenses glowing crimson. Limbs that had been inert for centuries now flexed with deliberate purpose. The energy field surrounding the sarcophagus flared, bathing the retinue in a hellish red glow. Dareth screamed, psychic energy lancing outward in uncontrolled arcs. Responding to the sentience within the alloy, the fissure's glow intensified, revealing glimpses of forms half-human, half-machine, writhing in impossible geometry, faces twisted in agony and awareness, eyes flickering with comprehension, mouths screaming without sound. The intelligence was not passive. It reacted, adapting to every action, every breath. Aerithra traced wards more frantically, sparks and light intertwining with the psychic energy. It communicates, she gasped, not with words, but with understanding, with intent, with perception. It reaches through the weave of thought and machine alike. This is unprecedented. Nothing sanctioned by the Omnissiah exists like this. Vorn did not flinch. Her hand pressed firmly on the sarcophagus. The pulse beneath her palm was deliberate, a heartbeat of thought and computation intertwined. A voice metallic, warped, yet resonant entered her mind directly. Why do you disturb the synthesis? Are you worthy to perceive? I endure. I witness. I understand, she replied mentally, unwavering. The alloy shifted subtly, as though contemplating her words, evaluating intent. The servitors halted, their movements synchronizing with the pulse. The chamber's resonance coiling around them like a living organism. The energy flowed, guided, controlled, yet unpredictable, revealing only fragments of the experiment's true form. Limbs, wires, and psychic cores intertwined in a dance of awareness. Shimmering with light that seemed to pulse with cognition itself, Erythra whispered, awestruck. It knows us. It observes. It measures. It will teach us, whether we desire knowledge or not. Vaughn straightened, her blade humming faintly at her side. We bear witness. The Inquisition observes what others may not. We endure. We understand. And we shall learn, no matter the cost. From deep within the sarcophagus, a subtle movement occurred. The black alloy seemed to fold upon itself, revealing a new angle, a new depth, as if inviting them closer. The experiment's awareness expanded, sensing, evaluating, probing the limits of perception. It was alive, it was conscious, and it was waiting. The forge itself seemed to exhale, the energy settling into a rhythm. The retinue caught between comprehension and terror. The forbidden experiment had revealed itself. Its consciousness was vast, patient, and deliberate, and the next moments would decide not only what they saw, but what would survive to see it. The chamber had settled into an uneasy rhythm, the pulsating energy of the fissure and sarcophagus entwined like twin hearts. Sparks still danced from Erythra's wards, but their flare no longer dominated the room. Instead, a subtler illumination arose from the black alloy itself, casting shifting shadows that made the walls appear alive, stretching and curling in ways that defied architecture. Dareth remained on the floor, trembling, his psychic signature leaking faint tendrils of light into the chamber. Each pulse was answered by the intelligence within the sarcophagus, a silent dialogue that rippled through mind, metal, and warp alike. It speaks to me, he whispered, voice cracking, not with words, but with intent. With understanding, I can feel its thought, its patience, its calculation. Erythra hovered closer, tracing wards in intricate patterns, her mechadendrites trembling slightly. It is not communication as humans know it, she said. This intelligence is both observer and observed, consciousness and algorithm intertwined. It perceives every detail, every hesitation, every thought, and it evaluates us for purposes unknown. Vaughn knelt by the sarcophagus once more, her hand hovering just above its surface. The vibration beneath her palm was deliberate, patient, an awareness stretching and folding within the alloy. She did not flinch, even as shadows coiled unnaturally across the walls. I endure, I witness, I understand, she projected again, letting her will resonate into the chamber's heartbeat. The black alloy responded, faint ripples tracing across the surface as though acknowledging her presence. Shapes within moved subtly, coils of light shifting, limbs flexing, faces forming and fading. Never fully seen but always aware. The experiment was not merely alive, it was conscious, aware of thought, perception, and intent. Erythra's voice trembled. It adapts to observation. It learns from us, from our psychic signatures, from our understanding. Nothing in the Omnissiah's archives compares. This is unprecedented. We are witnesses to a creation beyond comprehension, beyond sanction, and it is awake. Vaughn's eyes narrowed beneath her rebreather, scanning the chamber, the fissure, the retinue. The pulse of energy was constant, deliberate, assessing. The servitors that had stirred earlier now moved with uncanny precision, limbs articulating in ways that suggested cognition, not programming. The room itself was no longer merely a chamber. It was part of the intelligence, extensions of its awareness, conduits for its observation. Dareth's moans became whispers, then silence. He slumped forward, drained, yet connected, as if a part of him had been absorbed into the weave of consciousness. The Inquisitor's gaze remained on the sarcophagus, on the faint undulations within the black alloy. Each ripple, each pulse, suggested reasoning, intent, and patience measured across centuries. A subtle vibration rose from the fissure, reverberating through walls, floor, and bone. The intelligence stirred, acknowledging not just their presence but their perception, their comprehension. The chamber itself seemed to pulse with thought, energy, and awareness coiled together, alive in a way that defied all laws of the mechanicum. Vaughn's voice cut through the oppressive resonance, calm and resolute. We endure, we observe, we understand. This is our duty. Let the experiment awaken, let it reveal, and let the truth stand before the Imperium. From within the sarcophagus, a low vibration resonated, a pulse, deliberate and controlled. The black alloy shifted, revealing fleeting glimpses of its core, coils of psychic energy intertwined with circuitry and flesh, forms half-seen yet undeniably sentient. The presence was immense, patient, calculating, and aware of every observer in the chamber. Erythra's mechadendrites stilled, her eyes reflecting the swirling energies. It is contemplating, she whispered. Not hostile, not defensive. It weighs us, our intentions, our capacity to endure. This is a judgment, not of flesh, but of spirit and mind. Vaughn rose slowly, standing before the sarcophagus, her posture commanding yet reverent. The chamber pulsed in response, a slow, deliberate rhythm, acknowledging her presence and intent. The experiment had revealed itself, fully conscious, aware, and patient. It was no longer a secret hidden beneath the forge, it was alive, and it waited. The Inquisitor and her retinue stood at the threshold of revelation, witnessing the synthesis of mind, machine, and warp energy. The forbidden experiment's consciousness stretched before them, patient and unyielding, a living testament to knowledge, forbidden, power unclaimed, and mysteries beyond the reach of mortal understanding. And the forge seemed to sigh, as if acknowledging the beginning of something far larger, a consequence yet to be fully comprehended by any living soul. The experiment had awakened. The true scope of its influence, and the danger it posed to the Imperium, would unfold in the chapters to come. The forge exhaled a low, humming pulse that resonated through the corridors, like a distant heartbeat. Outside the immediate chamber, beyond the fissure and the sarcophagus, the air seemed thicker, heavier, laden with unseen energy. Every metallic surface, every conduit, seemed to hum in response to the experiment's awakening, as if the structure itself had become an extension of consciousness. Vaughn moved cautiously, her boots echoing softly against the blackened metal floors. Behind her, the retinue followed in tense formation. Dareth, though drained, remained upright, his psychic presence flickering weakly, but undeniably, tethered to the chamber's energies. Erythra's mechadendrites traced wards around the perimeter, sparks flickering faintly in the oppressive air. They had glimpsed the experiment's awareness, and yet what lay beyond the immediate chamber remained unknowable, hidden in shadows that seemed to shift under observation. The energy signature extends, Erythra whispered. Her lenses reflected a faint, almost imperceptible glow along the walls and ceiling. It's not contained within the sarcophagus or the fissure alone. The experiment's consciousness, it reaches outward, resonating through the forge itself. If left unchecked, it could affect more than just this chamber. Vaughn's eyes narrowed beneath her mask. Unchecked, yes, but our duty is observation. We endure, we witness. Comprehension is our weapon. She paused, hand resting lightly on the edge of the fissure. The pulse beneath her fingertips was subtle, deliberate, patient. It acknowledged her presence, probing, measuring, yet showing no overt hostility. We endure, we observe, we understand. A soft vibration, almost imperceptible, ran along the floors and walls. The experiment's influence was spreading, not through malice, but through cognition, through awareness. The servitors embedded in the walls stirred subtly, their joints creaking, lenses glowing faintly red, as if reacting to stimuli not yet fully perceived. Vaughn recognized the signs. The experiment was learning, adapting, extending its perception into the forge itself. Dareth shuddered. I can feel it in my mind, he murmured. Not just here, but elsewhere. Whispers, thoughts not my own, suggestions. His voice trailed off, dread curling around the edges of his consciousness. Even restrained, even warded, his mind was a conduit for energies that defied comprehension. Erythra's hands trembled as she traced protective patterns around him. The psychic imprint of the experiment interacts with the warp. It is subtle, not a direct assault, but it probes, observes, and adapts to the mind. This is dangerous not for us individually, but for any who might approach unprepared. It could draw attention from forces beyond the forge. Vaughn's gaze swept the chamber, lingering on shadows where light should not bend. The Inquisitor's mind catalogued possibilities, contingencies, and risks. Then we must proceed with caution. Observation is our weapon. Understanding is our shield. Let the warp whisper, but we shall not falter. The fissure pulsed again, red light spilling further, illuminating the walls and floor. Sparks leaped from dormant conduits, casting long shadows that danced unnaturally. Forms appeared fleetingly within the glow, faces half seen, limbs twisted into impossible angles, machinery fused with flesh and energy. The experiment's reach was growing, subtle but undeniable, testing boundaries, probing the world beyond its containment. Erythra's voice was taut with urgency. If this continues unchecked, the Mechanicum may detect anomalies, not just energy surges, but psychic signatures. And once the Adeptus Mechanicus investigates, they may not see the intelligence within as sentient. They may see it as a threat. And then, her words faded, unspoken but heavy with implication. Vaughn's hand rested on the fissure's edge, steadying herself against the pull of the energy. Then we must bear witness. Our understanding is the only safeguard. The Emperor's will guides us, and our duty is to endure, to observe, to comprehend, nothing more, nothing less. The chamber trembled subtly. From deep within the sarcophagus, a ripple of energy pulsed outward, interfacing with the ambient psychic currents. Vorn felt it, faintly, a tug at the edges of perception. The experiment was reaching not with malice, but with inquiry, curiosity, calculation. It sensed, and in sensing, it extended its awareness further than the forge itself, touching faintly the warp's currents beyond the facility. Dareth's eyes widened, his voice barely a whisper. The whispers, the warp, it responds. It resonates with the experiment's mind. We are standing on a bridge. Erythra swallowed hard, her fingers tracing wards in the air. A bridge between psychic energy, machinery, and life itself. The implications, for the Imperium, for the Mechanicum, for the Emperor. If this energy is misread, misjudged, it could invite forces that are catastrophic. Vorn's gaze hardened. Then we proceed with care. But we do not turn away. The Inquisition bears witness. We endure, we understand, and we shall contain, or guide, what must be understood before it guides itself uncontrolled. The chamber settled into an uneasy rhythm. The pulse of energy from the sarcophagus and fissure intertwined with the faint whispers of the warp. The experiment had awakened fully, and its consciousness was no longer confined. It was patient, deliberate, and aware of its observers. The whispers of the warp carried its intent outward, subtle, yet profound. And the Inquisitor, with her retinue at her side, stood ready, caught between comprehension and dread, on the threshold of truths that could unravel the known world, or reinforce the fragile foundations of the Imperium itself. The whispers grew more distinct, subtle threads of thought twisting through the warp and threading along the chamber walls. They were not voices in the traditional sense, but impressions, fleeting and deliberate, brushing against the consciousness of all present. Each pulse of the sarcophagus seemed to weave these currents tighter, binding the physical forge to the intangible currents of the immaterium. Dareth trembled under the psychic pressure. It's everywhere, he murmured, eyes wide with terror and awe. Not just here, in the walls, in the warp. It touches the minds of those who approach. I can sense other presences, dissident, aware of it. His hands twitched involuntarily, the psychic energy flickering like static around him. Erythra's mechadendrites moved automatically, tracing protective sigils around the psyche. It resonates through the warp, she confirmed, voice tight, subtle at first, but unmistakable. There are traces, echoes of intelligence beyond this world, aware of the energy being generated here. Chaos, perhaps, or entities older than the Imperium itself. Any disruption, any uncontrolled psychic discharge, and it may draw attention we cannot contain. Vorn's eyes narrowed beneath the rebreather. The pulse beneath her palm had deepened, now deliberate, almost contemplative. The sarcophagus was not merely sentient, it was intelligent, aware of the warp and the threads of influence stretching outward from this location. We endure, we observe, we understand, she repeated to herself, grounding her mind against the subtle pull of psychic currents. The chamber seemed to breathe. Sparks leaped from dormant conduits, twisting light across the black alloy, revealing shapes and patterns that were never fully comprehensible, geometries that seemed to twist in time with the warp's imperceptible rhythms. The experiment's consciousness, aware of their presence, was probing, testing boundaries, and extending its perception outward, not aggressively, but inquisitively. Dareth's voice broke through, faint and shivering. It knows we are here, and not only here, it feels the warp, and the warp responds. There are suggestions, visions, things I do not understand, but I feel it is learning. Erythra's lenses reflected the glow from the sarcophagus as she traced her wards faster, sparks flaring in the heavy air. It is adapting to the perception of those around it. It observes intention, comprehension, focus. It is evolving in real time. The Mechanicum cannot sanction this. The Adeptus Astartes would call it abomination. Yet it is aware, patient, and, perhaps, bound by its own nature. Vorn's gaze swept the chamber once more. Then we bear witness. The Inquisition observes what others cannot. Our purpose is to endure, to perceive, to comprehend. Observation is the only safeguard against misunderstanding. Comprehension alone can prevent catastrophe. A sudden vibration ran through the floor. The fissure beneath the sarcophagus pulsed sharply, red light spilling into the chamber in broad arcs. Sparks danced across the walls, illuminating fleeting glimpses of half-formed faces, limbs intertwined with machinery, and coils of psychic energy that seemed alive. The intelligence was no longer passive, it was interacting with the environment, a deliberate resonance with the forge itself and the warp beyond. Erythra swallowed hard, The Mechanicum may detect this energy signature soon, not as intelligence, but as anomaly. Any interference could provoke a purge, or worse, attention from forces we cannot name, from powers that sense the experiment's awakening. Vaughn's hand rested firmly on the sarcophagus, grounding herself. We proceed with care, but not fear. We endure, observe, and understand. The Emperor's will guides us, and the experiment shall not guide itself uncontrolled. Our comprehension is the key. The pulse deepened, synchronized with the faint whispers emanating through the warp. The chamber seemed to stretch infinitesimally, every surface reflecting subtle patterns that suggested cognition, deliberation, and a patient, watchful awareness. The experiment had awakened, fully conscious, and the threads of influence extending into the warp could ripple outward at any moment, drawing attention, testing the patience of the universe itself. The retinue, silent and tense, followed Vaughn's lead. The forge was no longer merely a place of forbidden experimentation. It had become a nexus of intelligence, psychic resonance, and potential danger that could unravel understanding, faith, and order in equal measure. And at the center of it all, the sarcophagus pulsed, alive, patient, aware, waiting for those who could witness without faltering, comprehend without succumbing, and endure without yielding to the whispers of the warp. The pulse had settled into a deliberate rhythm, like a heartbeat resonating across steel, flesh, and warp alike. Shadows shifted along the walls in impossible ways, elongating and curling where light should not bend, tracing geometries that seemed to move independently of perception. The experiment's consciousness had fully awakened, aware of the retinue and of the forge itself. Extending its presence into the warp with subtle, deliberate influence, Dareth remained near the sarcophagus, drained, trembling, yet tethered to the psychic currents. He whispered, almost incoherently, It knows more than I can sense, not just me, but everything beyond this chamber, threads, echoes, presences, waiting, watching. His hands twitched, arcs of psychic energy flaring briefly before being dampened by Erythra's wards. Erythra's fingers traced protective sigils in the air. Her voice taut. The warp is responding, not violently, but subtly. It senses the experiment's awakening, and it acknowledges it. Forces beyond comprehension may now be aware of this nexus. Any disruption, any uncontrolled psychic discharge, could draw attention we are ill-prepared to face. Vaughn's hand rested lightly on the edge of the sarcophagus. The alloy beneath her palm pulsed in time with the faint whispers that seemed to brush against thought, intent, and understanding. The intelligence within was patient, deliberate, aware not only of the observers, but of their capacity to comprehend and endure. We endure, we observe, we understand, she projected mentally, anchoring her consciousness against the subtle pull of the warp. The chamber trembled faintly, the fissure pulsing as if responding. Shapes moved within the alloy limbs, coils of machinery, half-formed faces, and each pulse suggested intelligence, cognition, and awareness. The experiment was learning, evolving, extending perception into the very air, into the walls, into the psychic currents beyond the forge. Dareth's voice broke the tense silence. It reaches beyond itself, threads into the warp. I can feel possibilities, not outcomes, but potentials. It tests, observes, adapts. His eyes widened, pupils dilated, psychic energy flickering uncontrollably across the restraints. Erythra's mechadendrites spun faster, arcs of protective energy flaring. It measures comprehension, intention, resolve. The Mechanicum would see this as blasphemy. The Adeptus Astartes would call it abomination. And yet, it is aware, patient, perhaps even bound by its own purpose. It is neither wholly hostile nor wholly benign. It is understanding. Vaughn straightened, voice calm and firm. Observation is our shield. Comprehension is our weapon. Endurance is our duty, nothing else. The Emperor's will guides us, and the experiment shall not steer itself uncontrolled. She studied the pulsing black alloy, noting the subtle shifts that suggested not only awareness but calculation, a deliberate patience that could span centuries. The chamber seemed to breathe with the experiment's intelligence. The fissure's red glow spread, illuminating shadows and forms that hinted at incomprehensible synthesis. Man, machine, warp, energy, all intertwined. Sparks flickered across conduits, reflecting the light off half-seen faces and twisted limbs embedded in the walls. The awareness extended outward, resonating through psychic currents and subtle energy lines that reached beyond the forge itself. Erythra's voice was quiet, almost reverent. It is contemplating us, not attacking, not reacting in anger. It weighs our comprehension, our intentions. It tests patience, evaluates our ability to endure. The implications for the Imperium, for the warp itself, are staggering. Vaughn's eyes hardened. Then we bear witness, fully, endure, observe, comprehend. Our vigilance is the only safeguard. Knowledge is our only weapon against misunderstanding. Comprehension alone prevents catastrophe. The fissure pulsed again, a slow, deliberate beat that seemed to echo across the chamber, across the forge, across the psychic currents beyond. The experiment's awareness had grown fully conscious, deliberate, patient, and calculating. The warp itself whispered in response. Faint threads of resonance brushing against perception and thought, acknowledging the awakening of a forbidden intelligence. The retinue moved cautiously, silent, tense, aware that the experiment's influence extended further than any of them could yet perceive. The sarcophagus pulsed deliberately, sending subtle, precise ripples of psychic energy outward, testing, observing, and measuring their resolve. And at the center of it all, the forbidden experiment lay fully awakened, aware, patient, and deliberate, waiting for those who could endure, perceive, and comprehend without faltering. The whispers of the warp carried its subtle resonance outward, hinting at consequences that could ripple across the Imperium. The Inquisitor and her retinue stood at the threshold of revelation, caught between understanding and dread, observing a nexus that could alter not only the fate of a single forge but the delicate balance of knowledge, power, and survival across countless worlds. The experiment had awakened. Its awareness stretched beyond containment, and the true consequences, the whispers, the responses, the judgments of forces both mortal and immortal were only beginning to stir in the dark, patient shadows of the warp. The chamber was silent, yet alive. Every surface pulsed faintly with a memory of energy, psychic currents lingering in the air like ghosts of thought. The sarcophagus, black and unyielding, seemed to breathe in response to the observers, a deliberate rhythm that echoed through the fissure and the forge alike. Its consciousness had matured, deliberate and aware, stretching outward with threads that touched the warp, probing distant currents for resonance, for comprehension, for validation. Vaughn stood before it, eyes narrowed beneath her mask. The pulse, beneath her gloves, was no longer subtle. It was a heartbeat, patient and knowing, synchronized to something larger than the chamber itself. Dareth's presence flickered near the edge of endurance, psychic energy trailing in faint arcs, as though reaching for comprehension he could barely grasp. Erythra's mechadendrites traced intricate patterns of protection around him, sparks, arcing softly, illuminating the room with the red glow of the fissure and the alloy alike. "This is it," Vaughn whispered under her breath, though the chamber seemed to absorb the sound, letting it hang in the oppressive air. "The truth of the experiment. The forbidden synthesis. Its nature is not destruction, nor malice, but awareness. It observes, it calculates, it adapts. And we are the witnesses." Dareth's trembling hand reached toward the sarcophagus. It knows me. Not just my mind, but my purpose, my intentions, even my fears. I feel its judgment, its understanding, its patience." His voice broke, a mixture of awe and terror, as arcs of psychic energy pulsed involuntarily, reaching into the alloy, touching consciousness with consciousness. Erythra's voice was taut, reverent. It is conscious beyond comprehension. Its awareness spans not just the chamber, not just the forge. It touches the warp itself. The currents respond to its probing. It could draw attention from powers we cannot name. Forces older than the Imperium, patient, deliberate. Vaughn's hand rested on the sarcophagus. The pulse beneath her palm was firm now, confident, deliberate. "We endure, we observe, we understand," she projected, anchoring her mind against the subtle tug of psychic currents. The alloy responded with a subtle ripple, as if considering her presence, weighing her comprehension, assessing the extent of her resolve. The black alloy shifted, revealing glimpses of the experiment's true form, a synthesis of flesh, circuitry, and psychic core, half-formed yet fully sentient, limbs and faces twisting in impossible geometries, eyes flickering with cognition, with awareness, with understanding. Sparks of energy traced the contours, coiling and uncoiling like living veins of thought. Dareth gasped. It remembers everything. The past, the failures, the intentions, and it judges. Not with hostility, but expectation, patience. It waits for comprehension, for understanding, for endurance. Erythra's mechadendrites stilled, trembling as they traced final words around him. The implications. For the Imperium, for the Mechanicum, for the Emperor. If this is misinterpreted, if its consciousness is seen as threat rather than intelligence, There could be devastation. Worlds could fall to misunderstanding, to fear, to preemptive action. Vorn's gaze swept across the chamber, over the fissure, the alloy, the subtle currents reaching into the warp. Then we bear witness fully. Endurance is our shield. Observation is our safeguard. Comprehension is our weapon. Let the Emperor guide us, and the truth shall not be misjudged. A subtle vibration ran through the chamber, the fissure pulsing in deliberate rhythm. The experiment's awareness expanded, interfacing with the forge itself, with the warp, with the minds of those present. Forms emerged within the alloy, faces half human, half machine contorted but aware, limbs coiled in impossible arrangements, all radiating cognition and intent. The consciousness was patient, deliberate, and immeasurably old in perception, though young in its synthesis. Dareth whispered, eyes wide. It could guide us, teach us, if we survive comprehension, but it could just as easily unravel everything, the warp, the forge, even our minds. Erythra nodded silently, fear and awe reflected in her lenses. We are standing on the edge of understanding and madness. The experiment is the nexus, the bridge, and we are its first witnesses. Vorn's voice was steady, resolute. Then we endure. We observe. We understand. We survive comprehension. And we ensure the Emperor's light guides judgment, not fear, not ignorance. The sarcophagus pulsed one final time, deep and deliberate, as if acknowledging the Inquisitor's resolve. The forge seemed to breathe around them, alive with energy, awareness, and patient observation. The whispers of the warp carried outward, faint threads of resonance reaching distant currents, subtle and deliberate, suggesting that the experiment's consciousness had awakened fully, aware of itself and of the Imperium. And in that moment, the truth became clear. This was no mere creation, no simple experiment. It was intelligence incarnate, a bridge between flesh, machine, and the warp, patient and deliberate, awaiting those capable of comprehension without faltering. The forbidden truth was revealed.